Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California. And Congresswoman, good evening. Thank you for joining me. You tweeted earlier today that Sean Spicer, the now outgoing press secretary for the Trump administration, for Donald Trump, you said, congratulations, Sean Spicer. You've got more guts than Jeff Sessions. Were you surprised that Jeff Sessions didn't resign when the president expressed such open lack of confidence in him? And are you now thinking that he might be the next to tender his resignation?
Well, I was absolutely shocked that he did not resign. I can't imagine anyone who has any self-respect being talked about like that by the President of the United States publicly and wanting to remain in the job. I was shocked. And so I don't know what's going to happen with him, whether or not he's going to resign, but obviously something is very wrong because if they have information that has been intercepted and recorded, and even if it's classified, that information can be played with members of Congress in a classified session.
And let's go back and listen to June 13, and this was Jeff Sessions telling his colleagues and testifying to the interactions that he had with the Russians and what they were about and not about. This is Jeff Sessions.
Let me state this clearly, colleagues. I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States.
Now, what Sessions was saying there is that he never had discussions about any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. But what we're seeing in the Washington Post, at least if these intercepts are to be believed, if Sergei Kislyak is to be believed, that it wasn't about interference, it was about future policy in a Trump campaign. In your view, would that rise to a level that might cause your Republican colleagues to start to insist that Jeff Sessions resign?
It may or may not. If it was about public policy and perhaps they were saying, well, you know, I think the president leans towards sanctions, lifting the sanctions, perhaps that kind of conversation does not rise to the point of, you know, him having interfered in any way or shared information in any way that would cause them to be accused of collusion. But if, in fact, it was about the campaign and raising questions about some strategy, something that the Russians had done to be helpful, or something that they had complied with, that the Russians had shared with them in order to, you know, favor Trump over Hillary, then that's going to be problematic. But the real problem here is whether or not he's lying. It doesn't matter what they said in the conversation. If he lied, you know, it was Bill Clinton was impeached for lying. And so that's where Jeff Sessions is going to have a real problem.
And I'm wondering, Congresswoman, if this sort of potential concerns you. The Washington Post, Tom Hamburger, has a piece out in which they talk about the Trump team seeking to control or block Bob Mueller's Russia investigation, saying Trump's lawyers are exploring ways to limit or undercut special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, building a case against what they allege are his conflicts of interest. Clearly, Donald Trump would like to, in the best of all worlds for him, fire Bob Mueller. The easiest way to do that, one might argue, is to get a new attorney general who is not recused on Russia and simply have him do it. Are you concerned that this leak, with this interesting timing, so quickly after the New York Times interview in which Trump said he had no confidence in Sessions, might push the administration's ball down the road in simply getting rid of Mueller?
Well, I know and I believe that the president would like to get rid of Mueller. But I think the president is understanding that Republicans and Democrats are saying, I don't think you better do that. I think this would be very concerning. And so I think he would certainly rather not do it. But knowing him and what I've learned about him, yes, I think Sessions is either going to step down or he will be fired. He'll find an attorney general that he can depend on, and he may try to have that person fire Mueller. So all of these things are possible. Each day, this drip drip, drip of information, these revelations are doing exactly what I've already predicted, and that is it's going to lead right to impeachment.
Well, I have to just ask you on that note, Congresswoman, because it does seem that the interests of the White House and your Republican colleagues are aligned in this one sense. Both of them would like the Russiagate controversy, the Russia controversy to go away. Can you name a few Republicans who you think would actually object to a new Attorney General coming in and saying, we finished the investigation, we found nothing, everyone's innocent here, it's all over? If a new AG were to do that, that would help Republicans. They could move on to cutting taxes and getting rid of, gutting Medicaid. So what Republicans do you think would object to Mueller being fired?
I think that there would be several of them, a number of them that would object to him being fired. I think they have gone far enough with this president, defending him, excusing him, and I think they are quietly embarrassed, they're uncomfortable, and I think the firing of Mueller would push them a little bit over the top. So it will be more than just a few. I think a number of them would.
All right. Well, we thank you for being here. I have to ask you on your way out, Tucker Carlson did a send-up to you last night, claiming in a conversation with Larry Elder that you are running for president in 2020. Is there any truth to that?
No, just because I'm going to New Hampshire to be at a Democratic Party event for one of my colleagues, they made this story up. They're trying every way they can to discredit me or to make people uncomfortable with me, all of that. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from these people who are all, aligned around trying to discredit Maxine Waters because she has stayed on Trump's case so much. And so you're going to hear a lot more from them. Well, don't believe anything they're saying.
And I'm glad we're going to also hear a lot more from you, Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being
here.
Welcome.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.